In this video, I'm going to show you 15 of the most powerful tricks that you can use to become truly godlike in Skyrim, so that by the end of this video, you'll be crushing giant skulls, breaking draugr bones, and laughing in the face of legendary dragons. The first trick on our list today is creating a build in which you take almost no physical damage at all. And I'm not exaggerating here, you can achieve up to a massive 80% reduction in physical damage. The way to do this is by hitting Skyrim's maximum effective armor rating of 567, or getting as close to it as possible, and this can actually be achieved using both heavy and light armor sets. There are a number of ways to do it, but the most straightforward and effective method is by smithing. Yes, you will need to max out your smithing skill for the full benefit, but you've got to expect some investment to be involved when becoming borderline invincible. If you have your smithing skill maxed out, you'll be able to hit that 5, 6, 7 cap by fully upgrading either any set of heavy armor in the game or a set of dragon scale light armor, and that will allow you to achieve the full 80% reduction in physical damage. If you have a slightly lower smithing skill, or if you want to improve a lower tier light armor to get as close to that 80% reduction as possible, then you could also consider activating the Lord Stone for an extra 50 armor rating. After all, it's not about hitting 80% at all costs, it's about getting as close as possible without having to force yourself into wearing an armor type that doesn't fit your build. Seriously, with this setup, nothing can touch you. Which, as it happens, is exactly how you should feel when you're browsing online. And today's sponsor, NordVPN, is the best way to ensure just that. And better still, if you sign up using my link today, then you'll get a huge discount plus an extra 4 months completely free of charge when you purchase a 2-year plan. So the next time you're browsing for those 700 mods, which are of course absolutely essential for your playthrough, you can do it with the peace of mind offered by Nord's brand new threat protection feature that will keep you safe from malware, phishing attacks, and other harmful threats online. It's also zero risk, as NordVPN offers a 30-day money-back guarantee on all purchases. So why not give it a try today using my link in the description down below. Now, there's one flaw in my first tip, and that's that while it makes physical damage a bit of a joke, it doesn't do anything to protect you from spellcasters. But don't worry, there's also a way to gain immunity to magic spells. And in this case, I really do mean immunity, as you can reduce the magic damage you take by 100% with the right build. And that build is the Necromage Vampire build. Here's how it works. Firstly, you'll need to become a vampire through either contracting the vampiric disease from an enemy vampire, of which there are many, or through the Dawnguard DLC main storyline. Then you're going to need to reach level 70 in Restoration in order to pick up the Necromage perk. Now, the tooltip of the Necromage perk tells you that it makes spells stronger against undead, specifically 25% stronger. What it doesn't make clear is that if you are yourself considered undead, i.e. you're a vampire, then any magical effect applied to you will also be 25% stronger, and that includes beneficial effects. So the magical buffs offered by Standing Stones, for example, as well as those offered by the perks that you unlock. Therefore, if you activate the Atronach Stone, which grants 50% spell absorption, as well as the Atronach perk from the Alteration Tree for another 30%, then the combined 80% spell absorption from these effects will be further amplified by 25% due to the Necromage perk, giving you a grand total of 100% spell absorption. And the key word there is absorption. So as well as not taking any magic damage at all, your magicka bar is also going to be refilling with every enemy spell that hits you. Is there a way to take advantage of that magicka regen? Of course, and we'll get to that later in the video. But for now, if you're going to use this incredibly overpowered build, just remember, you need to take the Necromage perk before activating the Atronach Stone or the Atronach perk. Otherwise, the buffs won't apply correctly and you won't get the full 100% absorption. Another way to achieve this level of functional invincibility is to utilize the Unstoppable Regeneration build. This involves picking up a whole bunch of health regeneration equipment, restoration spells, life-stealing weapons, and other buffs, which all add up to make it borderline impossible for enemies to do enough damage to outpace this combination of heal over time effects. Step 1 is to activate the Lady Stone, which can be found on a small island to the west of Riverwood, and it offers a blessing that increases your health and stamina regeneration by 25%. You're then going to want to top that blessing up with Fortify Healing Rate enchantments on as much of your equipment as possible, which will significantly increase your passive healing rate depending on your enchanting skill level. Now, that's already a pretty decent level of health regen, but we won't be stopping there. Next up, you're going to want to grab either the Ebony Blade, an easy to acquire Daedric artifact that steals your enemy's health with every hit, or alternatively Chrysamere, a sword that will turbocharge your passive regen. Personally, I like the Ebony Blade option, as providing you keep swinging it, it's incredibly hard for anything to kill you. And then of course you can supercharge this further with the Necromage Vampire buff that we discussed in the previous point, as that's going to boost the regeneration blessing from the Lady Stone as well as the healing effect of the Ebony Blade. Then, if that's not enough to keep you alive, which by the way it absolutely is, you could also pick up the Argonian Wraith so that you have access to the Hist Skin power that will rapidly regen your health once per day, and then throw in some active healing spells and potions for good measure, all of which will of course benefit from the Necromage Vampire boost that we just discussed. And if you really want to kick the arse out of it, you could even activate the Avoid Death perk from the Restoration skill tree, just in case an enemy hits you so hard that your broken regeneration rate can't save you, as what this perk does is it tops you back up to full health once per day if you drop below 10% health. And yeah, good luck to any enemy trying to take you out with all of that applied. Now naturally you're also going to want infinite stamina. I mean, there's no point being basically invincible if you're constantly going to run out of puff during combat. Fortunately, infinite stamina is the easiest one of all to achieve, and it's as simple as drinking a nice hot cup of soup. Here's how it works. When you consume vegetable soup, an item that you can make using cooking in Skyrim, you gain 1 point of stamina regeneration per second for 720 seconds. Now, the way that Skyrim calculates stamina usage is a little bit strange. Basically, you only actually need 1 point of stamina to trigger any stamina-based action, such as sprinting, power attacking, or shield bashing, despite how much stamina these actions consume if you perform them with a full bar of stamina. Now, as vegetable soup never lets your stamina bar dip below 1, and as we've just learned, the real stamina cost of any stamina-based action is in fact only 1, this means that you can infinitely perform any action that requires stamina, even though your stamina bar actually looks empty. This is a truly broken feature of the game, and is especially relevant early on when stamina management is usually quite a big limitation. Better still, vegetable soup's not difficult to make. The ingredients are cabbage, potato, leek and tomato, 3 of which you can find right outside of Whiterun at the local farms, and the only tricky one really is tomatoes, which don't grow anywhere surprisingly, so you just need to make sure that you save every single one as you find them. Now, the tips we've covered so far have mostly been focused on taking damage, but that is of course only one side of the coin. And I did promise at the start of this video that you'd be crushing dragon skulls. Well, anyone who's played Skyrim even once will no doubt be aware of how powerful sneak attacks can be, due to the multipliers applied to their damage output. But not everyone will be aware of just how far you can take that multiplier. By default, a melee sneak attack deals 6 times normal damage, but that increases to 15 times if you've taken the Assassin's Blade perk in the sneak tree. Now, combine that with the Shrouded Gloves or Ancient Shrouded Gloves from the Dark Brotherhood, which double your sneak attack damage with one-handed weapons, and that becomes a 30 times multiplier, already pretty damn strong. Here's where it gets crazy though, and it's also the part that most players miss, and that is the additional multiplier added by the Orc racial power, Berserker Rage, which doubles all physical damage dealt and halves all physical damage taken for 60 seconds. The key thing about Berserker Rage in this scenario is that it doubles the total final output after all other modifiers have been applied, meaning that your 30 times dagger sneak attack becomes a 60 times multiplier. So to put that in perspective, a dagger with a base damage of 20 is suddenly hitting for well over 1000, and that's before enchantments, smithing upgrades or poisons are applied. Stick that on a super high base damage dagger, such as the Madness Dagger for example, and you're one-shotting pretty much anything from stealth. The trade-off of course is that you have to be green and slightly hideous looking. Now, when it comes to Magicka, you're not going to be hitting that level of damage with a single spell. However, you can absolutely use spells to become equally as overpowered, if not more so, and you can achieve this through the infinite spell stagger effect, which allows you to completely lock out your enemy, rendering them unable to move, cast, or attack, and you do this simply by spamming destruction spells into their face. To take advantage of this, you're first going to need a destruction skill of 40 in order to unlock the impact perk. This perk causes an effect where when you dual cast destruction spells like Frostbolt, Ice Spike or Lightning Bolt, they have a chance to stagger the enemy on hit, interrupting any action they were in the process of making, be that a spell cast, melee attack or even just trying to move. Now, technically, the stagger effect does depend on the damage output of your spell, so if you're underleveled or using weak gear, some tougher enemies, like dragons for example, might resist the stagger. But if you are using high level spells, then you can chain this stagger effect pretty much indefinitely on any enemy, basically breaking Skyrim's AI and making even dragons look like utter losers. You get to a point where pretty much any enemy in the game can just be locked in this permanent stun loop, literally unable to fight back. Dragons can be permanently grounded, Draugr Deathlords never get the ability to annoyingly shout at you, and giants will just have to stand there and take it, looking like a right bunch of plebs in front of their mammoths. Now, if you're smart, you're probably thinking, well, it's not infinite because eventually I'm going to run out of magicka when I'm spamming spells like this. Well, not necessarily, and we'll talk about that later in the video. However, it's first worth talking about another way in which you can stagger lock your enemies, and this approach doesn't require magic at all. In fact, it only requires that you get your hands on a particularly broken weapon, the infamous Wind Shear. And any Skyrim veteran probably knows where I'm going with this one. On paper, Wind Shear looks quite frankly like a bit of a dud. It's a one-handed sword with a base damage of just 11, which is laughably low compared to most endgame weapons. But the damage it deals doesn't matter, it's all about the damage that it prevents. You see, Wind Shear has a unique hidden effect. Every time you hit an enemy, it causes an instant stagger. Now, combine that with the weapon's fast swing speed, and you can chain those hits to keep enemies in a permanent state of stagger, from which they never recover long enough to actually hit you back. And that's not even the best part in my opinion. When you use Wind Shear to bash, so when you press attack while blocking, it actually applies a full paralysis effect that basically ragdolls the enemy to the floor, which, as well as being pretty hilarious, means that you can alternate between staggering and bashing enemies in order to control entire groups. You can focus your slashes on the main target and then bash away the rest of the enemies until it's their turn to take the beating. So, as well as it being akin to activating God mode in 1v1 against literally any enemy in the game, it's also pretty damn good in a group setting as well. To get it, you're going to need to reach the end of the Dark Brotherhood questline. You're going to need to get to the quest Hail Sithis, in which you board the Emperor's ship, the Kataraya. Then, rather than going straight for your target, you're going to need to walk up onto the deck of the ship, where you'll find Wind Shear embedded in the bowsprit of the ship, which is the little pointy bit of wood that sticks out the front. Actually, while we're on the theme of broken weapons, there are a few more that I want to cover, because they definitely fall into the category of making your character feel like a god. With the first one actually being the combination of a weapon and a shout. And again, I bet there are some Skyrim vets watching this video who know exactly what I'm about to say. I am of course talking about the long hammer combined with the elemental fury shout. Much like Wind Shear, the long hammer looks completely unremarkable. Just another two-handed mace with a low base damage of 21. But don't let that fool you, this thing is a damage per second marvel. And here's why. Unlike every other Warhammer in the game, the long hammer has a passive effect that makes it swing 30% faster. Now, on its own, that already gives it a very high sustained DPS, actually one of the most powerful in the game. But the real insanity begins when you combine it with Elemental Fury, a shout that increases your attack swing by 100%, but with the catch that it cannot be used with enchanted weapons. However, despite the long hammer having its 30% faster swing effect, it technically doesn't count as being enchanted. Therefore, the Elemental Fury effect is applied on top of the existing 30% attack speed boost of the long hammer, allowing you to swing a two-handed mace at the speed of a one-handed sword, just putting out absurd levels of damage. And best of all, you can grab it early on. You just need to head to Liar's Retreat, which is south of Dragonbridge, and loot it from the final room. If that's still not enough damage for you, then there is one final combination that you can use to make an even more powerful melee weapon, and that is taking a Stalrim weapon and applying a Chaos enchantment to it. And the ridiculous damage that results from this is due to a bugged interaction between the Chaos enchantment and the unique effect of Stalrim weapons. Basically, all Skyrim weapons have a trait that makes any frost damage enchantment placed on them 25% stronger, which is a nice little boost in its own right, but it's certainly not game-breaking. Now, enter the Chaos Damage Enchantment, another addition of the Dragonborn DLC that adds fire, frost, and shock damage to a weapon simultaneously. Now, logically, you would think that the 25% Skyrim bonus would only apply to the frost portion of that effect, but that's not what happens. Instead, due to what's widely considered, like I said, a bugged interaction, that 25% bonus applies to all three elements, fire, frost, and shock, already giving the Chaos Enchantment a huge bonus when applied to Skyrim weapons. And then due to the fact that you can further increase each of these damage types through the augmented frost, flame, and shock perks in the destruction skill tree, then you end up with something ridiculous. I think it's around an 8 times multiplier on Chaos Damage enchantments when they're applied to Skyrim weapons specifically, causing you to put out a truly ridiculous level of damage. The cherry on top is that if you have 100 skill in enchanting, then you can even apply a second enchantment that's also going to benefit from this multiplier and make your weapon absolutely ridiculous. The result being that these enchanted Skyrim weapons put out the most DPS of any weapon in the game by far. If you want to take advantage of this, you will of course first need to make a Skyrim weapon, then you'll need to get your hands on the Chaos Enchantment by looting and disenchanting the Champion's Cudgel, which can be found from General Folkskarius at the end of the March of the Dead quest on Solstheim. The final weapon I want to cover that basically turns you into a god in Skyrim is the Bow of Shadows, and this one doesn't even need to be combined with a special shout or enchanting effect. It simply has a spammable mechanic that makes it pretty much impossible for any enemy to even hit you, let alone kill you. Basically, the Bow of Shadows has an effect in which every time you draw it, you automatically turn invisible for 30 seconds. That means, even if your stealth breaks, you can simply put your bow away, draw it again, and instantly turn invisible, with no cooldown and no penalty. You can fire a shot, vanish, reposition, and repeat over and over while the enemy stumbles around unable to connect with a single hit. And unlike a typical enchanted effect, this invisibility doesn't consume any charges, so you can just spam it endlessly. It's god mode in a bow, quite frankly. On top of that, it's also a pretty bloody strong bow by default. It has a base damage of 19, which is only 1 point lower than a Dragonborn bow, and it's also faster, so when continuously firing, it actually has higher DPS than a Dragonborn bow, so it's got endgame damage in the package as well. And to top it all off, it's not even difficult to get. You simply need to start the In the Shadows quest by speaking to Proventus Avenici, or Brill, depending on whether the Stormcloaks hold Whiterun or not, and then follow the quest line to its conclusion in order to receive the Bow of Shadows as your reward. But of course, these overpowered weapons still require you to do all of the dirty work yourself, when instead you could simply outsource it. And who better to outsource death and destruction to than the trusty Draymora, who quite frankly can't get enough of it, they love it. And while most players are no doubt aware that you can summon a single Draymora, well, what do you do when it's a two-man job? Get your own hands dirty again? You see the problem. Well, the good news is, with the right setup, you can actually have two of them fighting at once. This requires the Twin Souls perk, which in turn requires 100 conjuration skill, which of course does make this a bit of an investment. But once you have this perk, you will be able to summon two powerful Draymora Lords with over 300 health each, and both wielding a Daedric Greatsword, which puts out some serious damage. A single Draymora Lord doesn't scale that well into the late game, but two of them can make even the hardest encounters feel like a breeze. You can leave your trusty Draymora to carve through your enemies and take all the damage whilst you sip mead and nibble sweet rolls, occasionally throwing in a spell or two if you're feeling generous. The spell tome for Conjure Draymora Lord can be bought from Phineas Gester at the College of Winterhold. Then from there, it is a bit of a grind to get the Twin Souls perk, unless you're going to use one of the naughtier leveling techniques from my other videos. But once you get there, you can rest on your laurels and let your demonic sidekicks do all of the work. But why settle for two servants when you could have your own army? Now, this one is getting into the realms of ridiculousness, and it's not something to create your entire build around, as it can only be used once per in-game day, well, twice actually if you have the Ethereal Crown, but it's absurdly fun and powerful when you do unleash it. Now, normally, necromancy is pretty limited in Skyrim. You can raise one or even two corpses at a time with the Twin Souls perk that we just discussed from the Conjuration tree. However, with a few clever tricks, you can turn that into a whole legion of undead followers marching under your command, and use that overwhelming force to win pretty much any fight in the game. Here's how. First, you're going to need to max out your conjuration skill and grab the Twin Souls perk, as per my previous tip. Then you're going to need to go and acquire the Ritual Stone Blessing, which you can get to the northeast of Whiterun. This standing stone lets you reanimate every corpse in the area for 200 seconds, with no limit on how many. You can then combine that with your Twin Daedra, a normal follower, an animal follower, and a room full of corpses, and effectively become the Lich King of Skyrim, standing at the head of an undead army commanded by your two trusty Dremora lords. Suck on that one, Arthas. As I said, the downside of this is that you can only do it once per day by default, but you can also store a second ritual blessing using the Ethereal Crown in order to give yourself a second daily use. Then on top of that, if you want to look into it, there are various techniques you could potentially use to increase the duration of the spell so that your army can serve you for a little longer. Now, remember earlier when we talked about the spell stagger build, and I mentioned that later in the video we would discuss how to fuel it with infinite magicka. Well, now it's time to talk about just that. Basically, if you're willing to invest some time into getting the right gear set up, you can make any school of magic completely free to cast, and here's how to do it. Firstly, you need to raise your enchanting skill all the way up to level 100, then invest 5 points into the enchanter perk, and 1 point into the insightful enchanter perk. You may also want to consider unlocking the extra effects perk, because that's going to allow you to eliminate the cost of 2 different schools of magic with a single set of equipment. The reason you need 100 enchanting, by the way, is so that you can guarantee the maximum potency of the enchantment, though you could also consider fortify enchanting equipment or potions to achieve this if you're slightly under 100 skill. Though bear in mind that the extra effect perk does require 100 skill anyway, and I would highly advise using it, like I said, if you want to have one piece of equipment that completely eliminates the cost of 2 different schools of magic. Once you've got this, you're going to need to gather or craft 4 pieces of unenchanted gear, helmet, chest, ring, and necklace, and you're then going to need to enchant each of these pieces with a 4 to 5 25% effect for the school of magic you want to become free to cast, like Fortify Destruction, for example. Then you simply need to throw all of that gear on, and et voila, you have 100% spell cost reduction for either 1 or 2 schools of magic. This one just feels ridiculously broken, as magicka is clearly supposed to be a limited resource in Skyrim, and therefore magical damage output isn't really balanced for infinite casting, resulting in this little trick turning you into an absolutely unstoppable tempest of magic damage that no enemy will be able to withstand. Okay, these last 2 tips definitely fall into the realm of exploits, but they are insanely powerful and worth knowing about. They're a bit of fun if nothing else. Firstly, there is an unbelievably simple trick to get you a whole load of golden items the moment you walk out of the tutorial. Basically, when Bethesda designed merchants in Skyrim, they, for whatever reason, chose to store their shop inventories in buried chests nearby. However, they made the fatal flaw of not burying them deep enough. So of course it was only a matter of time before players started to find them. Now, there are a number of these chests to be found in Skyrim, and while some of them require clipping through walls and other such nonsense, there are also at least 3 chests that you can literally just loot from above ground, providing you know where to look. The first one can be found just outside of Solitude, buried underneath this grassy patch that you can see just outside the main gate, and by the way, you'll need to crouch down to access it. And as you can see, it is absolutely jam-packed with goodies and gold. Then there's a second merchant chest that you can find just outside of Markarth, next to this wall that you can see just in front of me now, and you just need to go to the other side of the wall and you should easily be able to locate the chest. And finally, you have the Dawnstar merchant chest, which can be found just outside of the Ironbreaker mine, which is pretty much within the town of Dawnstar itself, as you can see in the footage right now. And the chest can be found next to this rock formation. These chests offer a wealth of weapons, armor, and consumables, as well as a pretty healthy pile of gold, which is quite frankly going to give you a massive head start in the early game. Oh, and even better, it doesn't even count as stealing, so you don't even have to worry about getting arrested by the guards. And finally, if all else fails, bring out the big guns. The infamous Fortify Restoration crafting loop. And buckle up for this one, as it's easily the most broken glitch in Skyrim. Here's how it works. Firstly, you need to make yourself a set of Fortify Alchemy gear by getting hold of a Fortify Alchemy item such as Muri's Ring or the Ring of Pure Mixtures, and then disenchanting that item so that you can enchant its effect onto a set of your own gear. Then, with your Fortify Alchemy gear equipped, you'll need to approach an alchemy station and make a Fortify Restoration Potion, using any 2 Fortify Restoration ingredients, for example Abyssinian Longfin and Cyrodiilic Spadetail. And of course, if you're struggling to get enough of these ingredients, then you can always use the duplication glitch from trick number 4. Once you've created your Fortify Restoration Potion, you'll need to unequip your Fortify Alchemy gear and drink the potion. Then you need to re-equip your gear and repeat this process around 10 times. It sounds very weird, but basically, drinking the Restoration Potion and stacking your Fortify Restoration effect, for whatever reason, glitches the Fortify Alchemy multiplier provided by your gear, and therefore causes the multipliers of the potions you make to go through the roof. You'll complete this loop 8, 9, maybe 10 times. You'll know when you've gone too far because you'll start to get negative multipliers. There's a little bit of trial and error, so keep saving the game as you go. This is actually doubly important to keep saving the game because another thing it will do if you go too far is completely crash out. But anyway, the end result is going to be potions with absolutely ludicrous multipliers, as you can see on the screen right now. Though, as I mentioned at the start of this point, they will also trivialize it, so proceed with caution. Anyway, that's it for this video. Please consider leaving a like and subscribing for more Skyrim content, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.